Well, here's the secret. You're the only one here. Nobody else is here. You're projecting this whole thing. And so if we're unkind to ourselves, the world becomes a scary place. And when we're kind to ourselves, the world becomes a warm and engaging place.
We are genuinely delighted and absolutely privileged to have John Sanei with us. John has become a friend over time, a guide and associate, but John is a trailblazer. He's an author, he's a future strategist, and he goes into board meetings, he goes into and literally on stage and turns a place alive. And John is with us today. He's graced us with his presence. John, welcome.
Wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. Great to be here with you as always.
John, we did a session together about 6, 7 years ago, and that was an extremely candid, open, and interesting session. And I dare say that's what's going to happen today. John, before we get into and dive into your future strategy and how you're changing the world and so on, just give us a little flavor of who you are and where does John come from and who are we talking to?
Okay. My mom and dad are Persian. They became adventurous while they were pregnant with me and decided to move to Africa. So I grew up in Swaziland in South Africa for most of my life. And, living in a world where you're the only Iranian in a world of all sorts of other cultures really got me to become very, I guess, needed to fit in many ways because I was always a bit of an outsider. And becoming a storyteller became part and parcel of me trying to fit into the culture that I was thrown into. And so from a very young age, storytelling has been a part of who I was and how I made an impact in the world. And when I went into the world of entrepreneurship, I had retail stores and restaurants and all sorts of other businesses, but I always found myself to be the storyteller. And went through a bankruptcy, and it was quite a tumultuous sort of 5 or 6 years in my early 30s as I lost everything and had to recalibrate who I was, and came out of that sort of process with more stories and with more learnings. And the sort of pain of bankruptcy, especially as a young man, when your personality is very much linked to your perceived wealth and that sort of thing, and that gets taken away, you have to really dive deep into who you are and what you're about. And so this has really put me into good stead as I've become a professional speaker and strategist working with clients around the world. Storytelling, again, is such a big part of this process to get people to move, to catalyze, and to self-reflect on a deep level, to prepare for what I imagine must be the scariest time ahead of us with so much uncertainty. Storytelling becomes a very, very powerful tool. And so I've been honing this skill, I think, my whole life. And here I am talking to you, and what a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for giving us that sort of framework of thinking in terms of your life and your structure in terms of storytelling. It's a unique way of approaching it. And can we just drill deeper? Some of the greatest storytellers are scriptwriters in Hollywood, for example. And there's a structure of a story, there's a biology of a story, how we start with primacy, how we build and develop, and then we end with what we call recency. So the first 1 minute of a James Bond movie tells us and really gets us on edge. Is that the sort of philosophy you use, or do you have another way to approach it?
I mean, I think storytelling always requires a roller coaster of emotions, right? You need your audience on the edge of their seats, emotional, laughing, as well as having some level of inspiration after becoming very scared. So you have to have all of it in there. I don't know if I write my talks with that formula in mind, but I think it's naturally become part of how I tell stories, because I ultimately obviously want to leave the audience on a high, but I have to get them to feel why they need to do the work, to feel the privilege and responsibility for what they have to do to prepare for the future. And so I mean, yes, you're right. I've seen some fantastic speakers really take the audience on that high and low and tears. And I'm always trying to get better at what I do. So yes, I'm following that formula, but in a unique way.
In every story, there is a theme, and we need to try and create some tension. In your work, especially when you're talking about the future, and I've seen you performing, how do you create, what are the elements to create that tension that people are slightly uncomfortable as they're listening to you, as you take them through that?
You know, the first thing we have to realize is the society we live in has become addicted to certainty without even knowing it. You know, we've been programmed for seeking out stability over everything else, and many people still suffer from this. I think the first thing is to explain that, like to become aware of the mass addiction to this. That's the first step. And then the second step is to explain that we're all in the same boat together. This is a challenge for humanity that we are sitting with at the moment. It is not you in your own victim mindset. It's not you just in your organizational sector. This is a global challenge that we're all going through. And I think the shared fear of uncertainty also makes you feel more part of the whole. And it's in that process that I want us to all understand we're all in the same boat together. But the real trick is for us to take a deep, deep look and introspection of who we are, what we're doing, what intelligence we've accessed, so that we can start to think about accessing new versions of ourselves, new ways of being creative as we come out of this. So yes, there's massive tension, but it's all of our tension. That's the key here, is that we're all in this. And I remember our society has done everything it can for the last 200 years to bring as much certainty to our lives as it possibly could. We have weather apps and we have Google Maps and everything's about certainty. And now all of a sudden, since November, I would say even Jan 2023, February 2023, we all are in a mess. Like globally, people are uncertain about AI. Like this has not really happened because we've never been on mass so uncertain about something. And now all of a sudden we've let the magic out the box and nobody has the spell to put the magic back in the box. You know, we're almost like this in this collective uncertainty.
John, you have many personas, and we'll talk about all of them, or at least quite a few of them. You're an author, which is certainly a key thing that you're doing. You're a consummate author. You're also an international speaker. You spend time on boards and with individuals and CEOs and people of that nature and help them to shift. And when I'm in a board meeting and I'm presenting, people ask me, what's your job here? What would you like to achieve? And I said, only one thing, and that's mindset shift. If I can get the needle to move a wee bit, I've done my job. Everything else is detail. So in these different personas, is there a common thread that goes through in terms of and I know you're a great believer in neuroscience and you've done a lot of research, and I have a lot of respect for that. Is there a red line that goes through these different personas that you have?
Yes, absolutely. The number one thing I want to do is bring more optimism to the people I speak to. I think optimism is a superpower. I think optimism is lacking today because there's a level of hopelessness because of the lack of familiarity. And to be optimistic with uncertainty is a practiced skill. It's not something that arrives all of a sudden. Our brains are wired for stability, certainty, and the same. Even though we might be bored with it, we would rather go into a world of familiarity than to adventure. Even though many of us think we're spontaneous, our brains are quite literally not spontaneous. They're not designed to be spontaneous. And so to bring optimism in the space of uncertainty is my mission, is the golden thread. And in fact, something I try and practice myself as much as I can is agile optimism is a behavior that's not based on any outcome, but very much based on the behavior of being okay with uncertainty and still showing up with enthusiasm.
Yeah. Let me challenge you on that in terms of certainty. I mean, Tony Robbins' 6 levels of going from certainty to uncertainty to getting love and affection and building relationships and then giving back as an outcome, as a Maslow's hierarchy kind of concept. So the moment we get sufficient certainty, isn't that we want uncertainty and do adventure and do exciting things because we've got all the basics in place, and then you go for significance where we've got all our big cars and big homes and stuff like that in place. Aren't we looking for something more than certainty, love and affection, relationships, giving back? Isn't that where the human mind and the human psyche is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think we're both saying the same thing from different angles. Even the need for the big home, the love is about certainty. All of that really comes down to the point of, am I enough? Am I okay into the future? Am I being accepted enough? And in that in itself is a type of certainty that we're constantly seeking. But what I'm speaking about is the global feel of uncertainty. So you have your big house and you have a wife and husband that you love, but you don't know if AI is going to eat us in 6 years or not. You just don't know. And it's that level of certainty that I'm talking about, is on a mass global level, where we have now the wars happening both in Russia and in Israel. And now we have the potential for China and Taiwan. We have AI here. We have the crumbling of the dollar. We have the education system that's not working anymore. I mean, look, every point of certainty that we had is now up for question. And that's what I'm speaking about. So we talk about similar things, but in different contexts.
Understood. In terms of optimism, and I am also an extremely optimistic person. So, in terms of optimism, I always say that we are actually living in the best time ever. Even though
Yes.
our amygdala has clicked in and there are a lot of these difficult things happening in front of us, but in
Yes.
terms of all of the macroeconomic factors of prosperity, we are in the best time ever. Mortality rate is getting better, education is better, all of these things, amount of electricity that's available, and all of the macro factors. So actually, we're living in great times as opposed to difficult times.
But our emotional states have never been worse. We have more anxiousness, more loneliness than ever before. The pharmaceutical industries are making more money than ever before, meaning that people are numbing themselves with all sorts of pharmaceuticals to get away from this level of anxiousness and uncertainty. So yes, we're living in macro positive times, but in micro times, I think our brains are really taking a lot of strain. Our emotional states are. And I read something the other day, which I really think is pertinent here, is that we're not suffering from burnout. We are suffering from betrayal. And it's the betrayal of the system that we were told to follow that would give us some comfort. And now we have the big house, and now we have the significance, but we are still deeply sad, anxious, and frustrated. And so what we have to ask ourselves is, have we been asking the right questions? And I think for the time we were, but we have to start asking new questions. And these new questions access different aspects of who we are, different personas, different types of creativity, and an improved version of what human success actually should be. We've been measuring it in terms of physical and macro terms, but really not giving much attention to our internal micro spaces, So again, I think we're saying the same things, but from different contexts.
That's very interesting insight. Thank you for that, John. Let's take you inside a boardroom. You're standing there, you're looking at people, say 15, 20 senior executives, and I know you do that regularly. Firstly, what's your biggest challenge there? And how do you bring about the change, transformation, innovation that you are a strategist at, as a future strategist? What's your challenge and how do you address it?
I have a three-pronged approach I call trust, courage, clarity. And I don't know if I have any challenges in there, except getting them to go through the process of trust, courage, clarity. So let me explain what that is, and then you'll see how we can come down into it. The first thing I have to do is get them to trust me. How do I get them to trust me through the process where I am their guide and they alleviate some responsibility towards me? And so that's the first thing. It's a human game. And I think that when you're sitting with 12 powerful people, they can get a sense of your emotional state of confidence and your emotional state of who you are and what energy you're bringing into the room. And so I think it's important to build that trust initially. And if there was a challenge, that would be the challenge. Maybe some people wouldn't trust you enough, but you want to get them to trust you so you can guide them onto the next steps. The second piece is courage. And the courage that I bring into the room is a deeply self-reflective, egotistical courage that they have to go on. And what does it mean? It means, do you have the courage as a board member to realize that you might not have the answers for tomorrow? And this is a very tough thing for any board member or any executive or any human, in fact, maybe wants to show up, is I might not have the skills for tomorrow. And the way I get them to build this courage is to realize that many of the largest companies in the world today, including Google, who didn't launch OpenAI, but OpenAI did, and NASA didn't launch SpaceX, and SpaceX had to come in and sort that out. These examples show us the smartest, richest people in the world don't have all the answers for tomorrow. And so you need to move into clarity, and clarity then becomes, can we build a team that is giving us some level of clarity of what tomorrow needs from us, so that we don't have to be schizophrenic inside this boardroom to both bring governance and stability to our businesses, plus be disruptive for tomorrow, which is almost an impossibility out of the same brain. So if I can build trust, then I can build courage, and then I can build clarity. And now we start to build a system that allows us to prepare for the future without making anybody too scared.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One of my first slides in all of my presentations, and I asked a rhetorical question to the audience, and what's one of the most important things in the future? And I talk about trust, and very closely followed by truth and ethics, which actually helps to drive that trust. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of trust. There's a trust deficit in organizations, in institutions, in governments, right across the board. There's a trust deficit. What are the key elements in your life that you feel, how should people, organizations, countries, what do we need to do to build trust back into our lives?
I mean, that's a big question, Tariq. I mean, you went from companies to countries. I mean, you went right across like the whole of humanity. I mean,
yeah, humanity, interplanetary systems.
Yeah, galactic. How do we build trust with the Galactic Federation? No. Look, I think there's been and I want to move a little bit into quantum here and into neuroscience, because if we think about what creates a lack of trust is an internal dialogue and a patterning of trauma that says, I am in danger. There's danger around me. I'm seeking danger. So I'm finding danger. So I keep reconfirming to myself that I can't trust. But actually, that was an internal dialogue that started off in the first place, because your inability to trust is because of your seeking of danger and people that you should be wary of. So I think it all comes down to an internal healing process, a trauma healing process that allows us to have a calm heart and a clear mind. And this process in itself creates more trust naturally. We are now sitting with a incoherent heart and brain. So our hearts are not healed. Our brains are in a high beta brainwave, fueled by anxiousness, greed, an addiction to certainty and significant seeking. And it's a ferocious monster that can never be fed, because no matter how much you have, it's not enough. And then you have a heart that hasn't been healed. And so now you have an incongruence. And so what happens? People are untrustworthy. You are untrustworthy to yourself, because you are wanting different things. You're not listening to your body, you're listening to your mind, and you're overriding different operating systems in yourself. And so this is a self-reflection point for every individual that creates mass lack of trust, because of every individual having that. And so we have to heal that within ourselves and slowly but surely allow that to ripple out and help organizations and countries.
Thank you for that. I know I went wide, but I was getting to organizations like the United Nations, World Bank, IMF. All of these were built 80, 90 years ago at a different time to address a different problem. They're just not being able to cope with the world of today. So I think that's one of the reasons why some of these larger institutions are not trusted. Then we get into banks. In the United States, I think people, only 28% of the people trust their banks to be fair and honest. Not trust your bank. I mean, that's where the trust deficits are. And if we cannot do even that, trust our banks, trust Congress, trust our big institutions.
What about pharmaceuticals? I mean, you can't. Yeah, I mean, you talk about your health here, not even just about your cash. I mean,
totally.
You got these pharmacies trying to screw you over and kill you and keep you addicted to drugs. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. And not only they're making you addicted to drugs, they're actually screwing you while they're addicting you to drugs. I mean, Johnson Johnson last year made $66 billion profit, and one of their insulin medicines and their leukemia medicines, Revlimid, They're making $10 billion on that. And it just, they're charging something like $164 per day. It costs them less than $1 to make, only because they can get away with it. So the health industrial complex, the arms industrial complex,
But
all
Tariq,
these things are, yeah,
all of them are run by baby boomers.
true.
And the baby boomers had a different set of consciousness, different idea of success. There was a different competitive mindset that was birthed into that era. And so we have an era that's coming up that's being indoctrinated by that era still. Those rules are 80 years old, just like you said, if not longer.
Yeah.
And so we have a lack of consciousness that's sitting in that state.
Sure. But the tech are all millennials. So the tech world, yeah.
I get that, but still you can see the backlash from that age group around what's happening here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we are seeing a shift, but we almost have to literally see this power structure fade out so we can have and allow some new level of power structure to come in. I mean, you can see this with the Senate, right? They're 110 in the shade. I mean, that's just one example, right?
Yes, exactly. Your other hat, which is your other persona, which is as an author, and I've seen you over the last few years being super prolific with writing books, and you just literally churn them out. I only had one other person, and I'm giving you the biggest honor to compare it with him. To him was Professor Tony Buzan. He wrote 144 books in his life.
That's unbelievable.
Exactly. And I said, Tony, how the hell do you write 144 books in one lifetime? And he had a method, he had a process, and that's how he was able to do that. You've done a lot of research. I think during COVID, you went fairly deep into that. Can you share some of your moments and how you sort of churned all of that out?
Well, look, I'm only on 10 books, so I'm nowhere near the 144. But I also think that the art of writing and communicating through that facet is slowly starting to shift because of ChatGPT and AI and what's around us. We don't see CD shops anymore. I don't think we'll see bookshops in the future. So I think it's changing, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's definitely changing. So I do think I'm maybe on my last project at the moment. It's quite a selfish process writing a book, to be honest. And the reason is that, and I learned this from Feng Shui. Feng Shui had a great principle that says, or has a great principle that says, in order to bring anything new into your life, you must get rid of the old.
Yes.
And so if you want new shoes, or if you want a partner in your life, you create space in the cupboard. You literally make space, right?
Yes. Yes.
And writing a book, making a podcast, doing all these things that I do allow me to download whatever thoughts and ideas and answers and questions that I have inside my head into a book and quite literally make space for more. That's actually what I'm doing. And so so it's a brain dump that then ends up to be a book, and then I move on to the next one.
When I was writing a chapter for 20%, and I was struggling to write, so he sort of coached me and beat me up a little bit, and he was bullying me into writing because I was hesitant, because I was overawed by him, and I'm saying I'm going to be an integral part of one of your best books, and I was hesitant, and he taught me a technique, and that was, he said, all of the greatest painters and all artists and sculptors, they used to, you put all the clay together and then you shape it afterwards. But the way we are trained at school and university is to get it right first time. So what tends to happen is that our mind just keeps stopping and trying to shape it as we go along. And he said that's actually the wrong way. And then he said just flow, and then just keep writing. And I hesitated, and then I started, and in 5-10 minutes later, it started flowing, and I was just writing. And he said, write any crap that you can come up with. You can finish it off later. Leonardo da Vinci painted 200 times of a Mona Lisa, and so on. So you basically do it many times. So experimentation, making mistakes, flowing was important. And halfway through that process, he stopped me and he said, you know something? Your mouth and your brain connection is faster than your brain and your hand connection in your case. He said, "Have you got a phone?" And then he said, "Press the button and start recording." And that was my epiphany, John. And now all of my books and all of my work that I'm doing, I'm actually recording it, then transcribing it, and then making it happen. So the book
That's
that
exactly what I do.
yeah, oh, brilliant.
That's exactly what I do. Is I also can't. My hand doesn't go quick enough. My typing is terrible.
Yes.
When I finish typing, it's just red lines all over the flipping page because there's spelling mistakes everywhere. So
Yeah,
yes, I think again, I think people think in different ways, right? So you're able to unpack your thoughts in different ways. Some people do it through talking. Some people can do it through writing.
that's
I'm
right.
very lucky, like you. It's through talking, so it's quite easy and it arrives. And often saying things that I'm surprised myself
Yeah,
because I listen to some of my books or read some of my books from the earlier times, and I'm like, wow, that's really good. I can't even remember saying that or writing it at all, you know? So yes, the flow state is really important. And I think
yeah,
what's really important there, what how you got coached there, what he was actually trying to coach you to do is move from a high beta brainwave to an alpha brainwave. And in that state with a high beta brainwave, we're into perfection. We're into critical, we have a critical voice inside our head. We're anxious. We think we're not good enough to be where we are. The
yeah.
minute you change your brainwave to an alpha, you get into a state of flow, acceptance, collaboration, and creativity. And it all comes down to neuroscience. So he was coaching you maybe indirectly to get you into a different brainwave. Mm.
So what's your, do you have a ritual? Do you have a methodology? I mean, do you meditate? Do you reflect? Do you swim?
Mm.
What's your routine?
So I think it's really important to get to firstly understand how important it is for you to have a alpha brainwave for as much of your awake day as possible. And in order to do that, you need to be able to be maintaining a very clear state of emotional awareness. And so my practice is constantly, am I in the right emotional state to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing? So that comes down to meditation, imagination, active imagination, which is something that many of us have never been taught, and physical activity, because I think body intelligence is also really important to be able to get your brain to move in different ways and get your body to be aligned with your brain. So I'm an advanced meditator. I meditate 2 to 3 hours a day. I am constantly in the process of active imagination because I understand what our brain's constantly doing is very comfortable with familiarity. You know, we have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are the same as yesterday, meaning that our brains don't really, you have to train it to imagine future possibilities that you're looking forward to rather than future possibilities that you're fearing, because that's what your brain's trying to do, is keep you safe. And so it's a skill to have active imagination. But when you're meditating and you got yourself into a calm state, it becomes a much easier thing to do because you've moved away from survival. Now you're moving into creativity, and then obviously physical activity. And I think something new I've actually really started to dive into is hydration. Is I've really become very clear on the incredible chronic dehydration that the human society is at large. And so I've become very, very clear about my hydration. And I think we don't give it enough credit that our bodies are made up of this much water, and what are we doing as far as the minerals are concerned. So it's a physical, emotional, and mental process on a daily basis to keep that coherence and level of awareness as smooth as possible. And trust me, I don't get it right. Sometimes I go into loops of victimhood and loops of, but I'm much more aware and sensitive to it now, and slowly but surely get better and better at getting out of a trigger as quickly as possible. One of the slides I use is, what is emotional intelligence? And the answer is, how long does it take you to come out of a trigger? And that's become a game that I play, is because the longer you stay in a trigger, the less emotionally intelligent you are, the less adaptable you are, the less energy you have to focus on what's important. And so this is a three-pronged game for me, you know, in my spirituality, my body, and my mental state, to keep
Can you
that
explain that
coherence.
trigger again? What does that mean? What's the trigger that you're
So
talking about?
we've all got triggers, right? So triggers get us to sulk, get angry, get envious, get jealous, get insecure. All these triggers, we all have them. And triggers are childhood pain that we haven't processed. And so you might have been abandoned from your dad, or you might have been overwhelmed by your mother, you might have been bullied. And when you feel that same sense of danger around you, you become triggered, you move back to becoming a child. And in that state of being a child, you start acting like a child. That's why sulking and temper tantrums are childlike, because we're moving back into unhealed child versions of ourselves.
Right.
the trick is to heal those, because those are memories and stories we've chosen to hold on to give us an identity. And sometimes what we do is we even dramatize those memories to give us even more fuel to be more anxious and be more angry and be more frustrated in our daily lives. We become addicted to that, right? My teacher says, he says, we become addicted to lives we don't even like. And that's what happens because we're in this constant trauma state. And we can see the world is in a constant trauma state. And the most world's famous trauma or triggered person that we know is Donald Trump, who's, with all of his wealth and all of his power, he's still triggered to being a very unhappy young boy. And so what we have to do is realize that all of these triggers are just pinpoints of what we need to heal. And so that's become the game, is when you're in a state of calm, you can see the triggers more apparently. You then seek the help to heal them because they are just stories. And in that process, move out the way from being triggered into the past and get all your energy back to start focusing into the future. And so to be a futurist, to be preparing for the future, you have to unhook yourself from childhood trauma so you can start having this energy for the future.
You use an Alvin Toffler quote quite a lot, that
Yes.
the illiterate of the future are not the ones who will not be able to read or write. They will be the ones who cannot unlearn, learn, and relearn.
Right.
I dare say you use that quite a bit. And when you're also a lecturer and at universities, a Singularity, and Duke, and various other. What's that experience like? I mean, how do you feel when you're standing up there helping to shape minds and thoughts and so
on? So firstly, let me just start off with unlearn. The reason I use that quote a lot is that most people don't know what the practice of unlearning looks like. So it's a buzzword. Yes, we must unlearn to relearn, but let's keep doing what we've always done. And so nobody quite understands what unlearn is. And every audience I speak to around the world, I said, who here can tell me what is unlearning? And people will say, if I learn something new, I'll forget the past. Wrong. That doesn't happen. So what you have to do is you have to almost understand the science of how your brain works and understand how you can literally go into your brain and unlearn patterns, habits, and behaviors that you've spent years developing because of your personality construct. And so the process of unlearning comes down to the process of active imagination, meditation, physical movement, the use of psychedelics. We can also see that's also now shifting the brain patterning. And so these are all my practices about how do I become more adaptable? How do I let go of trauma so I can be more focused on the future? So the practice of unlearning becomes imperative as we start to access new types of creativity. So that's the first part of that question. The second part is the funny thing about me lecturing at universities, and I've lectured around 20 or 30 at the moment, and I always start off my lectures with, I've never been to university. It's like, I am a self-taught product of modern society with access to ubiquitous information. I've just been very clear about what I'm fascinated with, and I've dived into my own study. And so the first thing I tell my students is, it's awesome and what a privilege that you are sitting in this lecture room. It's just a real privilege. But also remember that everybody around you is your competition. And everybody else around the world that's studying what you're studying right now, which is a lot of people, because education is quite the same in all places, because corporations require that degree to get them in, because what do we need? We need people to fit into a system. And that system in itself is crumbling. So you're sitting here preparing for a system, and the system doesn't seem to be working in the future. So it's great that you're doing it because you're developing critical thinking, you're making a network, but be very, very sure that your uniqueness becomes your currency of the future, not your sameness. And your sameness used to be what used to give you the success. So besides what you're doing here, what else are you doing? And how many other things are you doing to bring a more adaptable way of thinking?
It's interesting. I was speaking 6, 7, 8 years ago at KPMG's Global Summit, and I started with, I'm a failed accountant. And I would have given my right arm to be sitting exactly where you are sitting. But here you are 25 years later, coming back to listen to my journey and how I meandered through life and learned through life. So, and it took me, that's when I lost my hair. That's when because I thought I was just going to be a failed bean counter for the rest of my life. And and that trauma was quite interesting.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah.
but then I came out stronger because of that. And I always talk about failure, and I have what I call the 5 F's of failure: fail fast, fail frequently, fail frugally. Uh, Failure is not fatal, and always fail forward. And the sixth bonus
Nice.
F is failure is a good F word.
I like that. I like that. I think that should be your first one. I like that. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your life, were there many failures? And I want to demystify failure because I've screwed up so many times in my life, and people are so
Mm.
scared of failure. I think that's part
Mm.
of what I encounter. That a lot of hesitation and inertia in people's life to adapt, change, be agile, move forward is the fear of failure. Quick thoughts on that?
Well, it's the fear of change.
Okay.
It's the addiction to familiarity. It's not so much failure. It's I don't want to move out of my familiarness. And again, I'm sorry to keep bringing this back to it, but it comes down to your brain. Your brain is addicted to certainty. It's
Yeah.
not addicted to adaptability and experimentation. You have to train it to become like that. So I don't think people are fearful of failure. They're fearful of the lack of familiarity. And so anything out of that familiarity is deemed as a failure, firstly. Secondly, there's a myth, and I'm sure you'll agree, the myth of normal, the myth of what it should be. Like, why do you think you failed, Tariq? It's because there was some story told at some societal level that we've bought into that this is the norm. So think about marriage, right? So if you're not married forever and you don't have kids in a white picket fence and you don't die together, you failed. Well, who made that the norm? Like, what happened that unrealistic version of what we should be doing is the norm? And what are the norms around university and getting degrees and getting into a job? And now that we didn't fit into that norm and we feel ourselves as being failures. So the very concept of what is failure is a myth in itself because of the myth of the story that we've been told to follow as a society. So let's first unpack it from that level.
You're so true because you actually hit a raw nerve there because I'm single and I don't have a kid and I feel, hang on, I'm missing out on something really important. I mean, I love kids, so I would love to have kids. So that's more a personal driver, but you're right. I think there's a societal sort of momentum that one has to
Pressure.
follow.
Yes,
Pressure.
it's pressure. I mean, I always joke as a Middle Eastern, you grow up, you're allowed to be 4 careers, right? You can be a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, or a failure. I mean, they call it a failure. Why? Because it just didn't fit. Doesn't mean you failed. It just didn't fit into the construct of the myth of normal, right?
Yeah.
So
And
again, I think
that's why I ended up in accountancy because I had to be one of those 4.
exactly. And with
That's what
your
was pushing.
personality,
Yeah.
it's the worst job for you and me. I mean, I also wanted to be an accountant after school because
Yeah.
I remember chartered accountants would be earning the most money. So I thought to myself, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to become a chartered accountant. And when I finish school, I'm going to earn the biggest salary because I come from a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. I just had a small problem. I was terrible at accountancy. So I was like, I'm stuck. So I would join accounting, but I could not. It was all Chinese to me. I was like, I don't understand anything. I don't know how I'm going to be at this career. So I did fail. But again, I've come to realize what is failure because I'm nearly 50 years old. I've been married. I'm divorced. I'm single. I'm nomadic. I don't have the trappings of what success should be. I don't have the house and the car and the houses. I'm traveling the world. I've built a different life. And I could also fall back on the idea of, oh my God, am I a failure that I haven't done what society's told me to do? But then you know what I realized, Tariq? People who are doing what society told them to do are not happy. They're also not happy within the constructs of that safety and norm. They're not sitting there joyous and having, So again, it's all of it's a story, and we've also got to break out of the matrix of the story that we bought into.
Indeed. Something happened 9 months ago which fundamentally changed the world. ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
And how generative AI is going to start impacting us.
Yeah.
Some quick thoughts on that in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly of AI and ChatGPT.
I listened to a wonderful podcast that explained this on a archetype way, which wasn't the technical version. It was just on a mass consciousness. What have we done? And the story he explained really struck a chord for me. He related it to this Disney tale of a magician giving his apprentice the job of cleaning the castle while the magician was out. And what this apprentice did was started to clean, but started to get lazy. So he knew one spell, and his spell he put onto the broom to start cleaning and mopping the castle on his behalf. And slowly but surely, he got it right. And this broom started mopping and sweeping the whole castle. But then all of a sudden, it started doing it so much and so fast, it started flooding the castle. So in his panic, this apprentice didn't know the magic spell to switch it off. So what he did is he broke the broom, hoping that it would end, but then it doubled in itself. And then it exponentially started to flood the castle. And the relation that this podcast was explaining is that what we've done is we've opened up Pandora's box and don't have the magic spell to close it. And what we've done is we've given the tools of magic to men that have not been initiated into elegant consciousness. And the way he describes it is that when you see a leader that is elegant and conscious, he is patient and she is patient. All our tech CEOs are incredibly impatient, which means they have not been initiated into consciousness, but they now hold the keys to this magic. We are in uncharted territory. I have no idea what's going to happen, and I don't think anybody else does. I think the best thing we could be doing is staying as centered as possible through this process. We can already see that technology has multiple implications depending on where you are in the world. Think about digital dictatorships in China and Russia, but then you also have blockchain democracies in other parts of the world. And so really choose, where are your consciousness? Are you stuck in fear? And if you are stuck in fear, you'll most probably attract yourself a government and a structure that will be much more fearful around it. But if you're moving in a state of flow, consciousness, and connectedness, I would imagine you would choose a different experience of it. That's just my hope that we have in this process.
The question that I'm asked regularly, and I will ask you the same, and that is AI going to replace human beings in terms of jobs and opportunities?
Yes, in our current state, absolutely. And this whole idea that AI won't replace you or replace you somebody who knows AI, yes, I think that's a bridge. But I do think that in our current state, our current level of intelligence, which is algorithmic intelligence, which is about pattern repetition and pattern recognition, which is what school and education taught us, this is 100% replaceable and is happening right in front of our eyes. What we have to do is access new types of creativity, develop new types of courage, so that we can access new versions of who we are, so that AI becomes an ally. Right now, it is a 100% enemy, because in our current state, we are totally disruptible with AI. Look at you and me, Tariq, just you and I. Strategy, disruptible. AI can do it better. MCing, AI. How many events have I been to? Even the event that you and I spoke at Hilton had an AI MC, right? I mean, right. What's the next phase? That AI MC will become more humanistic. We'll start speaking in 15 different languages, depending on who's in the audience. I mean, that's our job gone, right? So authors gone, musicians gone. So yes, in our current state, I think we're absolutely replaceable. And that's why there needs to be a catalyst into new versions of who we are.
Yeah. So I have two insights on that. One is that AI, as where it's at the moment, potentially cannot replace human beings, but a human with an AI is replacing where we are today. In other words, use AI as a tool. So that's insight number one. The second thing is that anything that can be digitized, in my view, will be, because it's faster and 1,000,000 times cheaper. But anything and everything, and you touched on a lot of them: imagination, creativity, heart, soul, spirit, our sense of judgment, intuition. All of these things will be 1,000,000 times more valuable, and AI will, in our foreseeable future, will not get there. So I think our challenge, yours and mine, really is to find those human attributes and really sharpen them and polish them, that they are the ones that we lead with, and AI just supports us. I use the analogy of a horse. A horse is bigger than us, stronger than us, and faster than us, but we ride it. As long as we can continue to ride the horse, we're still ahead. And that's how I see AI. So that was,
well, look, we're not competing against the horse to see who can run faster or
precisely.
drag. That's it. So that's exactly it. Is that we have to give up the idea of what we thought what was intelligence and
Yeah.
creativity to access new types of it. And yes, that will allow us to keep riding the horse. But right now, the horse is challenging us for our physicality. This is what's kind of happening. So we have to get on top of it. But yeah, I agree with you. Good analogy.
So a few quick questions, and then we can start wrapping up. Question number one: should parents be scared in terms of education for young people and how Gen Z and a lot of young people are coming through? What is your advice to them? Are they in a good place? Their children
I
and
think
the advice
I
to
think
parents
that
regarding their
yeah.
children. Yeah.
Well, I think the parents should be scared more for themselves than for their kids, because they themselves will be competing against their kids in the job market really soon, and they're going to be clueless compared to them. So your kids will be fine. They'll figure it out because they're more natively connected into the world we're moving into. I think our current educational system is preparing our kids for 1986. But I also think that the educational system is built by an older generation that doesn't quite understand what adaptability looks like. It's much more about intelligence and knowledge still, which is an irrelevant skill when we start moving into a world of ubiquitous knowledge and intelligence. So my advice always is twofold. One, how quickly can you get your children to access their genius? And the way you get somebody to access their genius is by exposure to as many different industries as possible, because we only start to connect the invisible dots to our golden thread when we've been exposed to as many things as possible. That gives us an identity based on a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. No, I don't like that. No, I like this. And you come into this, the access to your genius. The second thing I always suggest is look for problems to solve and understand the skills you need to solve those problems. We're moving away from a job market and a job economy to a problem-solving economy. And so you have to access your genius and then look for problems to solve, and then combine that with other people around the world to solve problems, and then move on to the next problem. So it's a different identity, because for the longest time, we've actually attached our identity to the jobs we've had. And we must stop doing that. We must stop asking our kids, what do you want to be when you're older? Because that's an irrelevant question. We don't even know what the jobs are going to be. What you should be asking them is, what problems do you want to be solving in the future? And what skills do you think you'd need for that? That's the kind of aim that we need to be having.
Sure. And purpose and passion, because I give
Genius.
a little,
Yeah.
and absolutely. And you mentioned words like flow and vitality, and also, and you can put ethics and our whole essence of who we are. That's part of our structure as we move forward. For leaders, any advice, business leaders, what do they need to do to cope with the future?
I don't want to be a leader in today's world. Honestly, I don't. I think it's the scariest job. You have to keep the lights on. You have to deal with your own emotions. You have to plant seeds for tomorrow. You have to deal with the emotions of what's going on with your employee. I mean, that is a hugely difficult job. But what I would always say is, don't try and do both. Keep the lights on and plant seeds for the future. You don't have the skills. You don't have the bandwidth just to keep the lights on in a fast changing world is a job on its own. You can't be innovative and disruptive. Build a team that focuses on tomorrow. Build a team that focuses on today. Keep them siloed to a certain extent so that they can be solving problems in totally different worlds with totally different KPIs, totally different capabilities. Stop trying to be schizophrenic and try and do all of it. So my advice to leadership is, your emotional intelligence becomes your highest skill set. And also understand, are you asking the right people to do the right things? Because we're often asking our existing staff members to think about tomorrow, which is not what they were hired for. And then we get frustrated. So we have to be much more fine-tuned in what are we trying to solve, today's problem or tomorrow's problem, and they're different problems.
Thank you. My final question is, if you were to write a message in a bottle and put a message in the bottle and throw it in the ocean, and we find it in 2030, let's say, so still near the near future, what will that message read? Message from John for the future generations.
Be kind to yourself. That's it. And I think that no, because everything is a reflection point and a ripple effect of the lack of kindness we have for ourselves. And when you are able to be kind, respectful, and trusting to yourself in your internal dialogue, you project that out into the world. And all of a sudden, what you have is a very warm, engaging, and optimistic reality around you. And the less kind we are to ourselves, the more we attack, the more we untrustworthy, the more we're just reflecting back to ourselves. There was a question asked of an Indian guru, and the Indian guru they said to him, what is the deepest truth that you could share with us? And he said, I don't know if you're ready to hear it. They said, no, please tell us. We want to hear. And he said, well, here's the secret. You're the only one here. Nobody else is here. You're projecting this whole thing. And so if we're unkind to ourselves, the world becomes a scary place. And when we're kind to ourselves, the world becomes a warm and engaging place.
One more question on in that spirit. If I put you in a time machine and take you to your 100th birthday, and you're only not even at half time yet,
Yes.
what have you done for the rest of your life, looking back from that point?
Oh, that's a big. I have no idea, Terry. Look, if I can help more animals, I'm a huge animal lover. If I can help more animals and give men the ability to be more connected to their hearts, I think that I would have done what I need to do. And I think we as men have not been trained to do that. Men are taking huge strain in a world that's changing fast. And we need to be able to connect to our emotional states a lot more, and hopefully be kinder to ourselves and to animals. That's kind of my mission.
John, you've been absolutely amazing. You've touched hearts. We've spoken about spirit, humanity, quantum, being an author, not wanting to be a leader, which is a very interesting one, and the human instinct towards that. And many other beautiful insights, John. You've been an absolute pleasure to be with you here today, and a privilege. Any final things, anything I may have missed, any quick comment before we close from your side?
No, not at all. Just always such a privilege to be here on this show with you, and always just feel like it's awesome. I've been self-taught, and here I am being asked questions, and I'm so happy to share it openly and abundantly, and I hope it really impacts people in the way that I wanted to. And sending everybody a lot of huge hugs and a lot of optimism for the future.
That's brilliant, because Voices of the Future, this platform that you're on, this ecosystem, is about collective impact, collective intelligence, collective consciousness, to make a difference in the world, to basically bring about and help humanity and help
absolutely.
And that's absolutely why we are in exactly the same journey with the same road. John, thank you very much indeed for your generosity of time and always energy. And let's catch up soon when you're back in town.
I look forward to it.
Thank
okay.
You.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao. Bye-bye.